Can I tell you who stands beside me are the two greater of musicians in this Queens area worldwide. I would like them to introduce themselves, and this is
Charles Bartlett of Bartlett Contemporary.
and
Carl Bartlett of Bartlett Contemporaries and the Bartlett Foundation.
This is a story of quality, commitment, community, and service. It's a story about two men, two brothers, who continue to inspire generations. I grew up with the Bartlett Contemporaries, playing the music of my teen years in New York. They've also played for Oprah, Spike Lee, the United Nations, and Congress, just to name a few. Their story is not the typical jazz or rock musician story. Stay tuned to find out what makes them different, what keeps them going for more than 5 decades.
It gives us great pleasure to introduce ourselves. We are Bartlett Contemporaries with the Next Generation Sound. The Next Generation Sound.
You are watching Profunda TV with host Phyllis Haynes.
It is so good to see you both. My gosh, it's been years since we've had a chance to really talk. You are the busiest, most popular band members and band owners that I know. So, hi, guys.
Hi,
Hi.
Phyllis. How are you?
I am wonderful. Listen, I know you've done some extraordinary things, which is why I wanted to do this interview. Um, yeah, I know you for a long time because we all grew up together in Queens, New York. But really want to know, I want to know the history. I want to understand what got you started as the Bartlett Contemporaries.
Okay, well, I'll get into that. My mother was a piano player. She played piano, and as youngsters, we started listening to her play the piano, and we always were interested. Once we heard those sounds, my mom playing the piano, we sort of got interested. We picked up the bongos and the guitars, and we started playing. And I started playing guitar. Carl was playing bongos, and we just started playing with her, and we sort of got interested in it. I was able to, she played a lot of jazz. So I was able to she had me listening to Dizzy Gillespie and Miles Davis. I turned out to be a trumpet player and a brass instructor. So I was listening to Miles Davis and Dizzy Gillespie. And at 5 years old, I could tell the difference between Miles Davis playing and Dizzy Gillespie. So immediately she said, and this kid's got a little ear, because I would listen to it. Right, I said, "That's Dizzy, mommy. That's Dizzy." And then I hear Miles Davis the next day, and she said, "Is that Dizzy?" I said, "No, that's not Dizzy. That's Miles." That's like, "What are you talking about? That's Miles Davis. And you played Dizzy yesterday." So immediately she knew that there was something up with Rennie. My middle name is Rennie, Charles Rennie Bartlett, and Rennie is there's a historical reference to that. My father used to go to Harlem to see the New York Renaissance basketball team. They played at a famous dance hall in Harlem called the Renaissance Casino.
138th Street.
138th Street in Harlem. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was trying to get that to have landmark status, but something happened and it never went through. But so my middle name is Rennie, named after the Renaissance Casino in Harlem. So we got our starts with Dorothy Bartlett playing the piano. And then when we moved out to Queens, it was all over. The Bartlett Contemporaries started in Queens. In Brooklyn, we were running down the street skating and scooters, and fight as dudes. Boys fight a little bit, fighting here and there. But when in Queen, it was peace and love, music and the girls, I'll say.
Okay, well, before we get to that part, Carl, so the actual Bartlett Contemporaries, who
Yes.
thought of the name?
Okay. Well, well,
Organically, yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Really both of us, but I mean, we named it after ourselves, Bartlett, and then we
Obviously.
contemporary. We just the name contemporary just sort of evolved because we were playing the music of the day, not just jazz, but we were playing whatever the music was of the day in the 60s, because we were at Andrew Jackson High School at that time. So we used a contemporary 7, contemporary 11, and actually we started out as the contemporary 7, then contemporary 11. Okay, and that was in 64, 1964.
Various iterations of the Bartlett Contemporaries.
And then we went to the World's Fair in 65, 64, 65. And and I'll add something else also, that our first keyboard piano came from Count Basie. Okay. And
Who
that was
lived in Queens.
Queens, right, Ansley Park.
We wound up playing for him as a young band. We wound up playing. His wife, Catherine Basie, was in charge of the Christian and Jews Association, and she had us playing for her backyard parties and various functions every summer. Specifically, I mean, we ran into Dick Roundtree there before he was Shaft,
And we ran into Ella Fitzgerald, just going to his home. Everyone is outside in the yard with the swimming pool and the party. We go inside to Catherine would say, Mrs. Bates, she said, "We all haven't met Count yet."
We hadn't met him.
Come
We
on
played there
now.
many years.
Many years. So you go in the living room and then you see Ella Fitzgerald just sitting on the sofa, just like casual, It was such a great experience. And when you see that sort of thing, to me, it's a reference like what my son experienced, Carl Jr., when he went with us, when we played our band, we performed for Spike Lee's wedding reception. And we took Carl along, and he's met Stevie Wonder, Denzel Washington, just to meet all of these celebrities, And he's a little fella, and that piqued his interest. Oh boy, he was ready to go, music.
So in turn, that's what happened.
That's
with
a
us.
parallelism. Yeah.
Okay, but now I do have a daughter who performs, so I know it's a big difference between jamming together with a bunch of friends and taking the step to become a formal band and step out on the stage.
Yes.
So what was that like? Did you just immediately feel free to perform, or did you have to work up the courage to create this thing?
Automatically, without hesitation, there was no hesitation about getting on the stage. I mean, we love music a lot, and we happened to be good at it right away. I mean, I right away I was, Miss Gluck in the school. She wanted me. That's the band teacher. She wanted me to play at Andrew Jackson High School. She wanted me to stay with clarinet because I was a pretty good clarinetist, but I didn't like the clarinet, and I said, I'm going to play trumpet. And I taught myself the trumpet over the summer, came back to school and said, I'm no longer a clarinet player. She said, and what are you going to play? I said, I'm going to play trumpet. Said, can you do this and can you do that? And I played all the scales. I played whatever she asked me to play, I could play. And she said, well, I must say, Mr. Bartlett, you've worked. And just a segue, 10 years after I became a band instructor, band teacher, I decided to go back and surprise her. She was still teaching there, my band teacher. Her name was Harriet Gluck. She was a wonderful teacher. And I came back now I had taught for 10 or 15 years, something like that. I came back and she jumped in front of the band class. She said, oh my gosh, she said, I heard you're a full-time musician. I said, yes, I'm also a full-time music teacher in this district. And she said, what? And then she introduced me. She said, this was my clarinet player that decided to become a trumpet player. And now he's a music teacher. And she said, would you sit in with the class and play with them? I said, sure. But
that is a wonderful story. You gave her the feeling that she made a difference in your life. That's the gift.
To answer your question, yeah, we just jumped into it naturally. Once we started in high school and people started hearing the band, and it just progressed. Gigs, Stephen Scott Orchestra, this one, that one. Yes.
So Carl, back to this performing business and working together. Did you two always agree, or was there? We've heard of some famous bands, them, where
Yes.
they play great music together, but they don't agree. Did you two get along all these years?
Tommy and Jimmy Dorsey.
Yeah, let me tell you something. We're fortunate, Ms. Phyllis, we are fortunate to this day, to our tender age that we are today, that we don't fight. And you know, and I we attribute that to my mother and my grandmother. Okay, we attribute it. It's just the way we grew up, and to tell it's like sometimes you just keep certain things to yourself. But we know the deal. We know the deal. We know the importance of family. We know it's the importance of being grounded. And I too, okay, was a teacher, part of the Department of Education. And like they say, each one teach one. But you have such an influence over kids, and when you see what's going on, and you know that if they're put in the right direction, it makes all the difference, And when I walk in, like even when I retired, and I went back and I started to do some per diem work, as they would say, or sub teaching. And I would walk in and I would think, I have a second grade class today. Okay, that's fine. But when I got to the office in school, the secretary says, "Oh, Mr. Bartlett, can you cover this class?" I knew what it was. It was the 8th grade class on the 4th floor in the back that's giving.
I might say they are buck wild,
and so but it was okay because I was up for the challenge. Mr. Bartlett was severely fair, and my kids knew that, and I knew I believed in tough love, And I told them, I would say, "Listen, kids, some of you all are lost, and what's worse than being lost? And being lost is bad enough. They didn't know." I said, "Being lost and not knowing you're lost." I said, "Some of you all are lost and you don't even know you're lost, but Mr. Bartlett's going to work with you." Right there.
You guys are going to make me cry because you're saying things that I dream of for all the people in our community. So what makes you, and I want you to think on this answer carefully, what made you two able to survive the hardship, the drugs, the crime that has affected not the whole neighborhood, but a lot of the people in the neighborhood? How did you two survive it?
You know how I'll answer that question. I would say that now, Charles and I speak for us, but the other kids like us too. Family, being affiliated with a faith-based institution and being grounded. It's like putting a shield of armor around you. Okay, I'm not professing to be goody two shoes, but I remember so much when I was at Hunter College. Charles went to NYU. I went to Hunter College, my BA and master's degree. And I remember being in Hunter College, and during the time, like I said, the song, the Caribbean song, "Pass the Dutchie," "Pass the Dutchie."
Pass the Dutchie to the right-hand side.
Right, exactly. And I remember I'm sitting there with the student union, the African American Student Union, and here comes the Dutchie getting ready to be passed to Bartlett. And I punked out. And that was the look that was given to me, for not indulging. But my parents put that shield of armor around us, okay? And we could go out into the world and deal with situations. And we know how to say, like sometimes they say, just say no. Well, we said no.
We just knew how to say it.
But you have to get that family, and there's so much that can be done. And even, I don't want to take the time because there's a passion. When I speak to parents, single parents, whatever the case may be, there are things that can be done, even with their homework, how you overlook. You may not know what to do. Like some parents will say, "Mr. Bartlett, I got to a point that my child is now in the 4th grade or 6th grade, the math that they're doing now, or the 7th." I said, "I understand it, but just see that they do their homework. You may not be able to know whether it's right or wrong, but let's see that they are doing their homework." That's the first step.
Exactly.
If you know that it's important enough for them to insist that they do it, then they may just understand now the importance of doing it.
But I just want to stay on the track in terms of the question you asked about us not getting involved or indulging. I mean, Carl is right with what he's saying, but we also saw the downside of what drugs, the proliferation of drugs in the community, especially the crack epidemic. But before crack, it was, everybody's smoking reefer, everybody's drinking wine. I mean, people would say, "Hey, Bartlett," people would come back to us like years after and say, "Hey, Bartlett, remember us when we were in high school, we used to drink Four Roses?" I said, No, I said we never drank Four Roses in high school. We never drank at all. So Bartlett, come on, man. You would know you were drinking that.
Yeah,
I said, and I would get serious with him because we never did. And I said, no, we never drank wine or alcohol at all. I said, to this day, I don't drink. To this day, I don't. I'll have a sip of amaretto and orange juice every now and then. But to this day, I don't drink. So I knew it was something people would just say because they knew we were musicians. So one musician, a quick story, one musician had the guts enough to come to my door and try to get us involved with drugs. He used to go to Andrew Jackson, and he was a little older than us. He came to the home, and my father had to go there and become uncharacteristic of who Charles M. Bartlett was. And he told him, don't ever come to this house again, or he would personally put his foot somewhere.
Right.
And that ended that. But we saw the down.
We were in high school at that time.
We were in high school.
Andrew Jackson.
We saw the downside of what drugs did to a lot of musicians, a lot of people in our age that our age now look like 15, 20 years older because they were
or have deceased
or not here.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the purpose of asking you this is so that your wisdom will carry over to other folks. So that's the value of us, all three of us being older. We have something to give back, which is that wisdom that you're saying. Your industry is one of the toughest, not just talking about the community. Your industry is one of the toughest industries in the world to function in. We've lost people like Amy Winehouse. You could name several musicians, one right after the other, dead because of overdose, etc. So how did you manage your band in this regard? How did you keep them functioning so well? I saw you at the United Nations performing. I know how good you are. So how did you keep the band on track?
Very easy. Well, because once we found out, because there were some musicians, we would play and intermission, and we had to be back on stage in 15, 20 minutes. And we see someone's coming in late, and we're so-and-so. Every time, as soon as the band goes on break, someone's out the door. Well, then it quickly put one and two together, and we cut it off like a bad cancer.
Cut it off at the knees.
Chop it right off. Chop. No second thought, if, ends, or buts about it. It's very, and then running track at Andrew Jackson. Okay, so we were in our prime, coming out of high school. And when we're teaching, we could tell our students, listen, we never smoked a cigarette. We cannot do anything else crazy. Not even a cigarette, a puff. Okay, that's what we from high school. And we just carried that on to our old age and did our old age today. Neither one was a cigar, a cigarette, nothing. So certain things that are part of us, and this goes back to what I said, you get that shield of armor around you, you go out into the world, you can deal, your 2 feet are planted firmly on the ground, you can speak to anyone about anything,
And
yes, go ahead.
Say when we saw musicians, we looked at them and looked at what they did or looked at their lifestyle, and if we noticed that it really wasn't fitting with us, we just had to end it. We'd say, listen, it's not working. A fellow that went to NYU with us, he's no longer with us, but he started doing drugs, and we just had to. I said, listen, I love you, man, but you're a great musician, but we can't have you. We just can't have you on the stage with us.
When you're on an intermission or on a break, you represent us, the band, Bartlett Contemporaries, Bartlett Foundation, whatever. See, that's our family name. So you represent us on and off the stage and what you do and how you do it. Even your appearance, appearance. And sometimes people think we may be a little over the top. And my son, Carl Jr., and we're very proud of him. I have one child, Carl Bartlett Jr., and he was on a 90% 4-year scholarship to the Manhattan School of Music, right? It's a phenomenal instrument. I mean, I play sax, so does he, but we're in a different league now, okay? But Carl is phenomenal, and he was on that scholarship. And he entered the International Songwriters Competition a few years ago, and the letter came back. The letter said out of 18,500 applicants from 122 countries, you placed #1 in the United States, #2 in the world. Okay, so he's phenomenal. But him too, same thing. You put that shield of armor, and my wife and I, we slip back and we say, I'm so glad Carl got past that teenage age and those 20s with hanging out in the clubs or whatever. But he was playing into jazz at that point in time, or still is. And so he just hang out with an older, more mature crowd, and he was grounded and he had that shield of armor so he could, deal. So
Yeah, let me just add about that same point you're talking about. As Carl said, Carl was grounded because Carl and I play a lot of jazz together. And Carl and I walk into a club, Carl Jr. that is, we walk into a club together and play, and I playing. And I don't know, like, where's Carl? He's sitting at the bar. He's like 20 years old, whatever. He's talking to people my age. But the jazz, having been surrounded around jazz, which is music that a lot of older people listened to at that time, it just had him in another sphere, musically speaking. And the people he would talk to and converse with were people in our age or maybe slightly older than him. I said, Carl, I'm talking to these two dudes, and I walk up and they're having a deep conversation about, Thelonious Monk and this one and that one and the Miles and Dizzy and all of this. And I say, quite interesting. I say, you gonna join us later and play? He said, oh, yeah, I'm coming down in a minute. But so it was, as Carl said, the parents helped us. Dorothy and Charles Bartlett grounded us. They told us what was right and what was wrong, and that was it. The parents really.
You've also been recognized by many celebrities. You've played for, as you said, Spike Lee's wedding. What are some of the other special occasions you've played that you can share with us?
Yeah, we played for the Essence Communications Group 8, 9, 10 times. They had these various very phenomenal functions at Radio City Music Hall, and they would hire us to do their after parties. Susan Taylor, who was the editor-in-chief at that time. And
the Black Congressional Caucus you've played for?
Yes, recently. Yes. Hakeem Jeffries, James, all of them.
Hakeem Jeffries, and you've been recognized for a couple of awards in Queens. Can you say what those awards are?
The City Council awarded us Living Legends of Queens. The former borough president, who is now the Queens DA, Melinda Katz, set aside September 16th as Charles and Carl Bartlett Day in Queens.
Whoa, that's fantastic.
We have the Congressional Achievement Award from Congressman Gregory Meeks. So then from Letitia James. The awards over the years, people recognize what we have done and what we are doing, because, having taught, and when it's a part of your DNA and you feel it, like I tell parents, I said, it's easier to build, Frederick Douglass, I'm taking this from him, Frederick Douglass says, it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. And that's what I have my students to write on. Mr. Bartlett walks in, that's up on the board, tell me what that means, and we get into it,
What I can hear in this interview is that you are as passionate about your young people that cross your path as you are about your music.
Right.
That's the thing. That's bringing tears behind my eyes right now. I knew you were good, and I knew that I cared about you because we grew up together.
That's right.
But you really have something special. You had some relationship with the Obama Foundation, correct?
Well, indirectly, but we have our own foundation, the Bartlett Foundation, which is a 501c3 public charity. Our mission is enrichment through the power of music for students, seniors, and veterans. And so what we do, we go out into the field and we offer free music offerings, if you will, to senior citizen centers, to the veterans homes, to the veterans hospital, to schools. But the part is, of late, we had to hold back from the schools because it's we feel a little disingenuous to do this in the school system because they took music out of the school system for the past 20 years. So you walk in and you get these kids excited, they hear saxophone and trumpet and keyboards playing. Oh, I want to do that. Then we say, oh no, they don't offer
no instrument.
No instrument, not in the city schools. You have to go out to Long Island or certain districts where parents are able to afford it. But in terms of across the board in a broad stroke way, it's been taken out of the New York City school system. So you mentioned the Obama. I know there was part of My Brother's Keeper, which was part of the Obama. They have a group in Brooklyn who is working with that in terms of trying to get music back in the school system. So collectively, our foundation, along with the Southeast Queens Music Educational Task Force, we're all doing things to try to see what we can do. And we were speaking to the Chancellor of the New York State Board of Regents, Dr. Lester Young, and he was just telling us the steps that's needed to get this back going. Because when you think about it, when you see these teenagers that are shooting this one, shooting that one, you never hear, oh, what does this? Oh, this kid is a musician and he did this. It's something about musicians, if you will. You never hear that any of these little kids that are 16 and 17, 18, 19 years old are shooting people. You never hear, oh, he plays piano, or he plays violin, or he plays keyboard, or whatever. You don't hear that because it's like a different fraternity, if you will, of kids.
Well, I mean, I might add that if you're a serious musician, and I emphasize the word serious musician, and I consider myself and my brother, we were serious musicians. When I was at NYU, my father used to come in from work and he would say, oh, Rennie's off today. He said, how long has he been down there in the basement?
And Rennie is Charles.
Yes.
We got that.
She got it. But said, Rennie, Doc, what's Rennie doing? He said, well, he's been down there since about 10 o'clock this morning. My father got it at 6 o'clock. So he came up for lunch. But I was practicing, and if that's being serious, and I'm sure having a daughter that sings opera, you know about that. But I'm just saying that if you're serious about your instrument, serious about music, you don't have time to be worrying about a gun and shooting people, and that's just not within your ethos. It's not part of you. Like what Carl is saying. Most times when you hear these young folks, our young folks, I have to say, going out and hitting people on the head and robbing people, you won't hear that oh, by the way, he plays music, or he's in the school band, or he's a singer,
Or he's in a marching band. You don't still hear it.
Nah.
That's a good point. So let's go to what your vision is for the Bartlett Contemporaries now. You have a lot of young musicians playing with you.
Yes.
What's your vision for the Bartlett Contemporaries? What's on the plan for the future?
Okay, well, I'll start there. Well, at present, I finished some original music, and part of the Bartlett Contemporaries are playing with me on my project. So I will, I'm getting involved with, the project is already finished. So now is what we call, the next process is shopping a label, getting a label, say, well, hey, Charles Bartlett has a product. I want you to listen to this product and sign Charles Bartlett to your label. If the label doesn't have me, because the label, getting a label deal now is a lot harder than it was years ago, because record companies were forking out a lot of money. Now a lot of people are doing it individually. I'd rather do it with a label situation, because they do all of the labor. I can concentrate on an artistic standpoint, from an artistic standpoint, and create, and not worry about when my next gig is or promoting the record, blah, 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 blah. So I'd rather do it with a record label. So part of the band is working with me in that regards. And that's one aspect of what the Bartlett Contemporaries, although the project is Charles Bartlett and New Bop, but it's really, in essence, part of the Bartlett Contemporaries that will be joining me in this endeavor.
Okay, let me say in a clear voice that any label that gets you is going to have a built-in audience. You have a huge following. You don't even need to do this interview. You have a huge following.
Thank you.
Any label that would be wise enough to take you, should be wise enough to take you on. So, I might even argue for you and say that maybe you should have your own label, though, because I know that this business is a hard business. So if people want to be in touch with you and know what you're doing, the bartlettfoundation.org is a place that people can find out a little bit more about you. I know you're working on your website. It'll be up later on in the summer. But right now, people want to find you, Bartlett Contemporaries Foundation.org. What is the title?
The bartlettfoundation.org.
Perfect.
The Bartlett.
And we will put that on the screen so people can see it.
Phone number, my phone number.
No, we're not going to give it. Hold on, I'm going to have to edit that out. Don't give out your phone number that way. I'll put it on the screen and edit this portion out.
Yes.
All right.
So is there anything you want to tell me that I've not asked you about that is in your heart that you want to express? Is there anything before we say goodbye that you want to share?
One thing I want to ask you, because when you mentioned it, you said any label. And there's a particular label, and I will say there's a particular label in your borough, and not in your borough, in your state, that
Okay, don't do this. No, don't do this. Don't
oh,
do this.
all right.
Okay. I'm going to edit all this part out. So
All right.
what I'm going to say, you never want to be in a position where you are going after something. Let them come after you from the perspective. So you don't want to be on there saying, "Oh, I want this label to know us." Forget that. Let them, if you want me to write to them and tell them they should do that, I'm happy to do that. But
Yeah.
don't be on that. Don't give them credit if they haven't signed you yet. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not going to use this piece that I'm speaking in the recording. I'll cut it out.
No, I hear you. I was only saying that because when you mention if there's any label, they don't really know us yet. They don't really know me.
Okay, so that's a conversation we can have. You want to be signed by a label, and it's time. It's time for you to get that opportunity. Yeah, it's time. Anything else you want to say except about the desire for the label?
Right.
Well, you can talk about the foundation, isn't it something?
Well, I mean, yes. Well, the foundation we sort of mentioned. Well, if you know of any way that we can help to amplify the need to get music back in the school system, we're just trying to get that word out so there's like a groundswell so that legislation can be passed. Because what happens, and we understand. Listen, we're teachers. We're former teachers. The importance of reading and STEM. We understand that, but we too know that when funding goes into many of the school districts, and the principals have that choice between upping the reading scores and the math scores, when it comes to the arts or music, later for it. But there's an importance of the arts, and so that has to be mandated, that it must go where it's earmarked to go. So I'm just saying, if you have any ideas or can think of anything along that line, that would be enormously helpful to us, to help us get our mission across: enrichment through the power of music for students, seniors, and veterans, and the community at large.
Okay, so my father, Charles M. Bartlett, had a lot to do with who we are as men today. As I said earlier, my mom, having been with us when we were growing up, during our formative years, definitely instilled quite a bit. But as we progressed and became young men, we sort of really were able to observe Dad and take on a lot of his characteristics in terms of how he dealt with business, because he was a staff sergeant in the Army, so he was used to being in charge. And we took a lot of that away with us when we had to deal in business situations with the band, with people signing contracts and negotiations. And, Carl did a lot of the business for the band after my dad, stopped really doing it after a while. Carl took on a lot of that responsibility, and even with the cruises that we did. So Carl took on a lot of that responsibility, but we got a lot of that from Dad, from Charles M. Bartlett.
Right.
So you said he was a staff sergeant. Did he serve in wartime?
World War II.
World War II.
World War II.
World War II. Yes, and I'll pick up on that note. Yes, my father, Charles M. Bartlett, he gave us a lot of direction in terms of understanding the world around us. And I remember, because when I went for my teaching exam, okay, and that was in late 60s, 69 to be exact. And I was so frustrated. He said, "Well, how did it go?" I said, "Dad, it went relatively, I believe it went all right. Obviously I passed the exam, but at the time I didn't know I passed it, whether I passed it." I said, "Dad," but when it came to the sports section, that was my toughest section to navigate. And he said, "The toughest section to navigate?" I said, "Yeah, they asked questions about everything else, but when it came to sports, they asked me, do I prefer to have a score of, in golf, 9 under par, 15 under par, or even par?" I didn't know the answer to that. Then he asked me, tennis, do you want to love, advantage, or deuce? And this is in the late 60s. There was no Arthur Ashe at that time. There was no Serena Williams. Okay, I didn't know anything about it. So then Dad told me a racially biased exam. So that just piqued, that got my attention. He brought that stuff to my attention, how the world around me is functioning actually.
So in my closing remarks, let me say this. people who know my show know I've interviewed a lot of people. This is a rare interview for me, but I have to say, you have made a difference in my life, in the community I grew up in the world in which we live. I've seen you at the highest places. I've seen you in difficult settings where the room, the echo, the sound systems weren't so good, but you still played through. No matter what the circumstances, you stood up, you delivered, and you not only represent great music, you represent great men. So I thank you for your time. I
Thank
really do. And
I thank
people can reach us. If they can't reach you, they can reach us through this program, and I will make sure that they figure out how to get to the Bartlett Contemporaries. Thank you, Carl Bartlett. Thank you, Charles Bartlett.
All right.
thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye now.